Hello, good evening to all participants of this sixth essential conference of the INSEAD Alumni in France. I'm lucky to be the president of this association, which is a superb give back type of job. The obvious reasons why we transformed our big presential event, which was supposed to take place at Microsoft, into 4 remote sessions is clear. The first session took place a month ago and was a big success. And the theme was basically the next normal perspectives. And here we are at the second session, which is leading for sustainability. This session, by the way, will be started, but I will talk about that at the end by 2 other sessions, which I will talk about. Before we start, let's thank our sponsor, BCG. I was wondering how I would introduce BCG, and what I thought about is I Googled BCG, and when I Googled BCG, I had 229 million results in 0.66 seconds. So I suppose that's enough of an introduction. We also work with in partnership with Community Impact Challenge. What is the Community Impact Challenge? It's supported by INSEAD, by our Hoffman Global Institute for Business and Society, and by the INSEAD Alumni Association in the world. The aim of this challenge is to mobilize this community with concrete actions to create a positive impact in order to become carbon net zero by 2030. I know that our friends from Lafarge will talk about their objective there also. This event is organized through the CIC Academy, which fosters lifelong learning and with the latest insight in shaping the future of business and society. Chloe will tell us more later on this initiative. So let's start, but before the start, we have an etiquette. So that's our conference of today. And the next slide is going to be the etiquette. The etiquette is audience is muted with video and microphone off, chat box disabled. Please use the Q&A tab to suggest questions for the panelists. The webinar is being recorded. For technical issues, email contact INSEAD alumni at inseadalumni.fr. And whenever the question, let's keep the conversation flowing. So now, without further waiting, let me introduce, next slide. Let me introduce the poll. We want to start to heat up our participants with a poll, which you will see in a second. And the question is very simple. What are the top 3 challenges for sustainability leaders? You see the possibilities. You have basically 30 seconds to give your top 3 challenges, and we'll see the results in a minute latest. The themes you see on these questions are obviously the themes which came out of the preparation with the panelists and are closely related to what we will discuss today. So we're waiting for your answers. If everything works. Yes. So, as you can see, the highest ranking answer is short-term versus long-term objectives, which is one of the big issues of sustainability, and especially in periods like at the moment. We then have another 57. We have how to move from theory to action, and we'll talk a lot about that. Bianca will push our panelists to talk about action and to talk about examples. Shareholders versus stakeholders objectives, very important. I think Michel Fredo from BCG, it was a very important issue, is, you know, like is sustainability sensitivity of board members. So that was the most important one. So that gives a hint to Bianca and our panelists to start the discussion. And so let me now introduce our panel, and especially before I introduce the panel, Bianca, our moderator.
Thank you very much, Thomas.
I'm introduced. No. I introduce you now.
Okay.
I introduce you now. And Bianca has worked in the environmental sector since 2008. She's active in boards and advisory groups of Client Earth, Environmental Funders Network, Sustainable Angle. With her husband, she endowed, and that's really the relation we have, the strong relation we have with INSEAD, she endowed the first chair for environmental sustainability at INSEAD, which is currently advising the Community Impact Challenge, which will present you its work at the end of this session, which I just talked about. She studied law in Vienna and Amsterdam, worked in packaging, publishing, and finance before being active in sustainability issues, and now lives on a farm in the south of England, where she walks the talk because she's setting up a regenerative farming business. She will moderate our superb panel. So the floor is yours, Bianca.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Welcome to this essential session on sustainability leadership. For me, the environmental crisis has three elements. Firstly, climate change, which is caused by global heating, and which is leading to increasingly extreme and frequent weather events, including devastating droughts, floods, and wildfires, as the one seen in California and Ohio this year. Secondly, loss of biodiversity. With us being in the midst of the 6th mass extinction, nearly 40% of plant species are threatened with extinction. More than 500 vertebrate species are almost extinct. In France alone, bird numbers have declined by a third in the past 15 years. And thirdly, pollution and waste. Worldwide, 9 out of 10 people breathe highly polluted air, with over 6 million deaths annually caused by air pollution. It is thought that 20 million tons of plastic enter our rivers and oceans each year. Solutions to all these problems exist. We now need to put them into action. I believe that to change the status quo, we need to question everything, and with courage, take the right action for a more positive future and all the opportunities it promises. Today, I'm delighted to be moderating such an interesting and diverse panel of industry experts who will be giving us examples from their experience. Magali Anderson, Chief Sustainability Officer of LafargeHolcim, the global leader in building solutions. Georges Devaux, Chief Strategy and Business Development Officer, AXA, one of the world's largest insurers. Michel Fredo, Managing Director and Senior Partner, Global Leader, Climate and Environment at Boston Consulting Group, one of the leading global management consulting firms. And Tim van Vliet, co-founder of INSEAD, a startup producing proteins, lipids, and fertilizer from rearing insects and aiming to become a worldwide leader in this new budding industry. The next 60 minutes will be structured the following way. First, Michel will very kindly give an overview from his unique perspective as a consultant to many leading corporations around the world over the climate action landscape that he sees. Secondly, we will ask the panelists 3 questions, which they will in turn answer. You as the audience can also pose questions to the panel via the Q&A box. I'm now delighted to hand over the word to Michel Frédéau.
So hello everyone, thank you Bianca. So if we start the discussion on climate, that is one of the ESG domain, but it's probably a unique one in terms of the emergency that we need to face. And maybe you can show my first slide that just illustrates the size of the issue, is that the current trajectory, as you see today, of the world is far from reaching what we agreed in Paris on the 1.5 degree path. And as Bianca said, already with 1 degree, you see the problems that we have that are already huge. So you can imagine on the 3 degree, on the 4 degree path, what will happen. The COVID year was the first year, in fact, we decreased the CO2 emissions by 5 to 7%. In fact, this is decline of 5 to 7% is what is required every year by 2030 to get a 50% reduction to put us back on the track. So we need a COVID a year. That's what we need, just to show the stakes of what we're talking about. So you can go to the next slide. And of course, we've got some good news, progressively good news. You know that the next COP after Paris, where countries will disclose their national determined contribution, will come in Glasgow in November 2021. You see that China has joined very recently. It's a great story because when China joins, all of a sudden Japan joins, South Korea joins. So we're progressively adding new countries and important countries. And hopefully we'll get the US quite soon, hopefully. Now, the ambition is a good thing. So you get an ambition to be a net zero, but then you need to ensure that you can deliver. So you need to develop sector roadmaps. What do you do with your oil and gas? What do you do with your steel, with your chemicals? And you need a policy framework to do that. Of course, Europe is in advance. We've got the taxonomy and we've got a number of regulations plus the stimuli that are going to feed that. But Europe is in advance. It means that the rest of the world is not in advance, and therefore there's still a lot to be done. But in this context, and that's the next slide, the pressure is really getting bigger and bigger on corporates, on you as companies. There's market pressure, there's operational pressure, investors pressure, and I'll come back to that, and I'm sure that Georges will come back to that as an investor's perspective, and legal pressure and societal pressure. And all this pressure pushes companies to take a stand, to get a commitment and to act on their climate risk and their climate agenda. And what you see is that it starts to be very serious, because now the next slide is that, you know, consumers and people around the world, this is a survey we did just after the COVID, 3,000 people around the world. And, you know, asking simple question, should companies integrate environmental consideration, so it's not just climate, it's climate and environment, into their product and services and the way to operate. And you see that it's not just France or Europe saying it should. It comes from the US, it comes from China, from India. And also, as we're talking a huge amount of money going into the stimuli and public aids, should, you know, companies that benefit from this aid should be held accountable on their environmental commitments? And the answer is yes. So there is, you know, a clear sense from the large audience and the large public to do that. And the next slide, I think, is also pushing on the positive side. It's our analysis shows that with the existing technologies, and we're talking simple things like energy efficiency, where energy, it's a no-brainer. There's no cost, there's only benefit. You reduce cost, you reduce CO2. Then renewable electricity or other type of levers that you can see, some of them are more costly, but they exist. And with these technologies, we can already have an action on our emissions quite forcefully. And that's, generating much more commitment and a change of behaviors in companies, corporates around the world. And I agree with Bianca that given the emergency and what needs to be done, can you go to the next slide, please? It's important that it's not just pledges, it's not just commitments. We need to get to delivery and to action. But you see that, the WEF Alliance of CEO Climate Leaders, where they're really trying to define what climate leadership is about. And they are discussing not only about, commitment on ambitions, but commitment on action and engagement, acting on policies, acting on their own sectors and their own value chains. You can see that a number of organizations like, CDP or SBTI, which is the reference in terms of validating companies' ambitions that are consistent with the Paris Agreement, are gaining traction. And you see the acceleration, you don't see it in the slide, but you see the acceleration of companies reporting and relating to that. And then you see a number of companies having, very strong pledges like Microsoft, announcing that they are not only going to get to net zero, but they're going to take all the CO2 out that since they were created. Or you don't see it here, Amazon that wants to be net zero in 2040. Schneider that is not only a best practice, but is really committed to support all their customers in terms of bringing the digital and the climate agenda to reduce emissions. So there is this momentum going on with a number of companies taking stands. And next slide, what you find out is that it's in all industries, in fact. You've got the Repsol, so it's an oil and gas company, and Repsol has very courageously stated that they were going to go net zero, including the scope 3, including the emissions of the use of their product, which means that they need to change drastically their business model. And you've seen that recently BP is doing the same with the full transformation of their operation and a reduction clearly stated of their oil and gas activities. And IKEA, I talked about Amazon as well, BMW with a real commitment on working with the supply chain to decarbonize their cars as much as they can. And if we get to the next slide, the thing is that we need to be convinced that, yes, there are big threats, and you can see that some sectors will be quite hit on their activities and their current business model. But at the same time, it's a major opportunity. It's a major opportunity because new sectors are going to open up. And most important, and that's the next slide, I think that what you will see is more and more companies, please next slide, will decide to take the lead. And our conviction at BCG is that this is the next source of competitive advantage. The sooner you get into the new business model that will be compatible with a 1.5 degree world, taking care of biodiversity, taking care of pollutions, exactly, of the overall ESG element, the sooner the companies will design the right products, the right operating modes. And you see that in cement, it's a very high intensity. Dalmia is moving, and I'm sure that Magali will explain us how Lafarge is also taking the lead on this one, even though it's a high emission intensity domain. You've got mining companies like Anglo American that is shifting completely their portfolio. So it's really strategic moves and preparing a portfolio that is compatible with the transition to a greener and a cleaner world, and preparing themselves for this world. And even innovation with Ørsted really changing completely their business model. They used to be, people forget, a coal-intensive utility. And now they're the leader in offshore wind, really making a difference and having high valuation. And therefore, the sources of competitive advantage are being built right now. Next slide. So it's possible to act. Of course, it's easier with the policies being put in place. So in Europe, it's going to be easier to move than it is currently in China. But as you see, all the countries are moving forward. And I think at the end, there's a list of things that companies can do on their side. I will not go too much on the investor side because I'm sure that George will describe what a company like AXA does on the investment side. On governance, yes, it is a question of policy, but for corporation, I think it's an opportunity to take the lead and to develop the new sources of competitive advantage, which means it's a different leadership model. So it starts with the board, it goes through the executive committee, and then the middle management and all the employees needs to align behind these new operating models and develop new ways of working and develop new business models. And therefore, innovation is important. And that's why I think it's very important to get also the startup and the new business model that can be developed, that can be integrated in the overall supply chain that needs to be reinvented as well. So having said that, the last thing I wanted to say is that, you know, us as BCG, we're committed, the next slide, please, are committed to work on the climate agenda for our clients. And of course, we need to walk the talk. And as a professional services, we've committed to reduce our emission in line with the target. On scope 1 and 2, it was fairly easy because, you know, we're a service company. On scope 3, the problem we have is the travel, because as you know, we tend to be close to our clients, and our clients are all over the place, and they want the best experts, and therefore it's not usually just crossing the street. And our travel per person is very significant. Nevertheless, we are working on it. We've already committed to reduce it by 30%. I think, by the way, the COVID exercise that we're doing today shows that this is possible, but it requires to get to 30% and then 40% and 50% to continue decrease it, to reinvent our model and to do it with our customers, but also to involve our own employees and our own consultants. You would not believe how this kind of journey is enthusiastic and mobilizing for our staff. And therefore, you get a lot of ideas. And I think that that's what you will observe in all the companies, is that your employees are ready to work on those and help build the new company. We've committed to neutralize 100% of the remaining emissions. And we have a fund of investment of BCG resources to work on climate topics so that we can fund it. You know, fund it, but at the end of the day, for a company like us, and I will end that, the best way to have impact on climate is to work for clients and to make it a business. It's not just the investment, it's really to bring our know-how and capabilities, our motivation and our engagement to help our clients to transform at the right speed in the best way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michel. I thought that was really excellent. I want to now invite all panelists to turn on their camera and microphone for the first question to the panel. I wanted to ask you today, please, can you talk about the personal journey that took you to where you are? What experience prepared you to lead your company through this transition period into a more sustainable future? Magali, can I hand the first word to you and then on to Tim, George, and Michel. I want to remind the audience that you can ask questions through the Q&A box.
Yes, Bianca, thank you. So good afternoon and maybe good morning for some people. Very happy to be here. So my journey is, I don't know if I can call that a typical journey, but I've worked for the first 27 years of my life in the oil and gas industry for Schlumberger. Started as an engineer on a drilling rig in Nigeria. And then I've been making my way through many in finding difficulty to talk here. Operational roles. I've been, for example, the CEO in Angola. I was in charge of Europe. So strong operation behind me. And I guess 4 years ago, call it the 50 crisis. You know, some people buy a sporty car. In my case, I wanted to find a job with a purpose. And that's when LafargeHolcim approached me to become the head of health and safety, and I thought that was a great move. So I did that for 3 years, divided the number of fatality by 3 in 3 years, was quite happy with my result and my purpose and everything. So when Jan Jenisch, our CEO, approached me 1 year ago and said, would you take the CSO role? I thought, well, I was happy to save life. What about saving the planet? And that's really how I took it. So I remember telling him, you know, if I take that job, it's because I want to save the planet. If I make LafargeHolcim looks good, it will be a collateral effect. And if you are not ready for that journey with me, you better not give it to me. And that was the mandate I got. Now, he put the job at ExCo level, and that made the full difference, because being part of the executive committee means I had all power. So it was really clear that I had to grab this opportunity to do something big. And of course, I'm French, so I had to make a revolution, right? But if you think about the cement industry, the cement industry represents 7% of the total emission of CO2. We are the biggest cement maker. I don't want to give you numbers. Well, I will. We emit 140 million tons of CO2. I think for a lot of people, it won't really mean that much. You know, Michel was talking about travel. Travel for us, even for a company of 70,000 people, represents 0.2% of our emission. So the job had to be, we knew that the impact was going to be really big, but for that we had to do something drastic. So that's why I thought, hey, let's do a pledge. And it looks like this, you know, a bit like, wow, but no one had ever done it in our industry. No one had done it, let's say, seriously, with a roadmap, with everything, and addressing the real cement, really what we do, and not addressing the full built environment that you will hear a lot. I had to bring the full ExCo with me. Was not always easy. Also, a little tip, what I was doing is every week I would pass by the office of all the ExCo members, including my boss, the CEO, and make sure that I would drop the word pledge in his ear so that the music was there, because it was not a complete winning case at the start, I guess, because it was getting too much out of the normal comfort zone of an industry which is relatively conservative, let's call it that way. The other problem I encountered very rapidly is that the roadmap did not exist. IEA, so International Energy Agencies, give some very high level roadmap, but you need SBTI that Michel mentioned earlier, Science-Based Target Initiative, to give you what should be your target. And that did not exist because no one had done it in our sector. So we worked with them to define our 2030 target, because all these pledges are very nice, but if you don't get to work right now, it won't work. So you really need a strong immediate target, which is for us was 2030. So we worked with them, we defined our 2030 target, and for the rest, we said, okay, let's partner to define the rest of the journey. So that's what we are going to do for the next year or two with SBTI. So I'm super proud that I will be part of the people who will make the actual roadmap to zero for the cement industry, which today does not exist. We managed to come up, the pledge for us is very technical. Decarbonizing cement, again, is something that you do via innovation, etc. So I had to engage about 100 experts. When I say I had to, it's maybe not the right wording, because people were so keen on it. I think when people, when you tell people, hey, why don't we give a purpose to that company? I think they all want to follow you. They are all in it. And it was great. Everyone was super motivated, but about 100 people work on it for about a year. That's how complicated it is. Because again, there was no way we were going to just come up with a PR announcement. It had to be super solid. And as a result, we came up with it during the New York Climate Week on the 21st of September. The announcement was actually part of Alok Sharma, who is the president of the COP26. He's a UK minister. He actually named LafargeHolcim in his opening speech, which I'm extremely proud of. So I will record that and show that to my grandchildren, I think, in some years. But it was all worth it, because now when we talk with not only external people, but even, I think even more maybe internal, is this overwhelming positive feedback of everybody saying, you know, working for a company that has a purpose is just, it's a different life. And I think it's really maybe what I'm actually the most proud of. So.
Thank you. I think that was really, really interesting. Can I pass on next to Tim, please?
Yeah, thank you, Bianca. So yeah, my name is Tim, and I'm the co-founder of INSEAD. I wanted to explain a little bit on why I am so passionate about sustainability, and that's also the story of how I got the idea to start my business. So I am Dutch, but I'm also Samoan. Samoa is an island nation in the Pacific, far away, of course, from here. I used to go there every so now and then for kind of the summer to see my family. And I remember the last time I was there was like 2.5 years ago, and I was in my family's village there, and I was talking to my aunt, and in the distance we were standing on the shore. In the distance, I saw my cousin come back, and he's a kind of a traditional fisherman, and he was in his boat, and he kind of waved to me, and I waved back. And as he came back, I saw he was smiling, but he wasn't very happy though. There was something kind of wrong with him, and I wasn't sure what it was. But as he approached closer, I saw as this green woven basket that is very, very common in the Pacific and in Polynesian culture. And normally it should be full of fish when they go for a fishing expedition. But he came back with, I think there were only like 2 fish in there. So that's when I realized why he was so sad and what was wrong. And then I had a chat with my aunt who was standing next to me, and she was explaining that this is the first generation where Samoans cannot sustain living catching fish anymore because there's just not enough fish left. And she also explained to me that a lot of the fish that's caught in the Pacific is not used. First of all the fish that's caught in the Pacific is all foreign countries coming to the Pacific and emptying the oceans. And second of all, and the thing that I never heard of, and it was kind of the craziest of all, is that the fish that's caught goes to aquaculture. So it's caught to feed other fish. So for example, for salmon farming or shrimp farming, it takes around 4 kg of wild fish, 4 kilograms of wild fish to grow 1 kilogram of salmon. And that was just kind of really amazing to me. And again, I'm very just crazy that, our appetite of salmon requires 4 times as much salmon in wild fish, which has devastating consequences to the oceans, but also to communities all over the world. And as he came back, I also saw a small bucket in there in the canoe with insects, because he was using insects as a bait or something. And then I realized, why don't we give those insects to the farmed fish and to the salmon or to other fish, and rather than getting fish to fish, give them insects because they like it. When I was a kid, I also used salmon or insects to catch fish. So that was the inspiration of INSEAD. We're growing insects for aquaculture, for shrimp, for farmed fish, which are more sustainable, that will save a lot of fish. But that's kind of the story of why it's so personal to me and why we care so much, where we really care about sustainability.
Thank you so much. That's very interesting. Can I pass on to Josh, please?
Thank you, Bianca. And so I'll give you a bit my story, but that, it really comes from the fact that I had the chance to work in very different parts of the world at very specific moments. So it was in China when the sort of market reforms started to take off in the early 2000s for quite a long time. I moved to Japan literally 2 weeks after the big tsunami. I was in Africa fairly recently, in different parts of Africa. And therefore, what this type of experience actually made the notion of resilience and the notion of not just sustainability, but creating sustainability around you, really a central part of how I think about life in business. In China, for example, this was all about, you had rapid change all the time. And so what we really had to think about is, what's the compass? What's the long term? How do you make sure that you trust your teams to sort of move forward, even when you're not there? In Japan, it was obvious. It was this notion of, you have a responsibility for the planet, You actually also is a zone with lots of hurricanes. So you are very concerned by, how is that going to evolve with climate change? And then Africa, I think, when you look at who is successful in Africa, they all, I've had the chance to interview more than, 50 CEOs of very successful African companies. And, all of them would say, having been thinking about how you build resiliency in how you operate is actually central to being successful in a fairly volatile environment. And so all of this came together, and coming to AXA, it was very interesting because what you realize is that in an insurance, you actually are a critical player in that role, because you observe the risks that comes with not being sustainable. You actually can influence, and we'll come probably back to this through your Investments Act, but also what you do, and you can act. You can act in confederation with actually your clients and your employees. And so all of this made it, it sort of fits with personal observation, professional activities, and I think the world in which we are. So that's how it's come to become something that it's really critical, I think, for all of us.
Thank you. Michel?
So my story is a bit more simple. It's a consultant story. So I've been working for energy players all my BCG life. And therefore, I've been working on energy transition for quite a while for different players. And one day I was looking at the top 300 emitters in the world of CO2. And I figured out that out of the 300, 200 were BCG clients. And I was saying to myself, if we're not doing something, then we're not really doing our job. And therefore, I thought it was part of our responsibility to make sure that those clients that we could see every day at all levels, that we should at least try to start, having a good discussion. So I went to see our CEO. BCG is quite entrepreneurial. And I said, look, we cannot continue like that. I mean, we need to do something. And BCG has a particular position because we work for all these guys, we work for governments, we work for investors. So it's a system, and we could try at least, start influencing those people by developing the right knowledge and the right approaches. And he said, okay, if you want to do it, why not? And therefore, I took we invented the climate and environment topic leader. So I took the role. And since then, I must say that I've been quite impressed by how BCG has mobilized, because there's a climate expertise center that has been developed throughout BCG for high emitting sectors. And now climate is present in the agenda of the finance institution practice, the private investors practice, the energy practice, it was already there, the industry practice, all the practices. And we have a strong Chinese team, a strong Indian team. It has spread out all over the place. And I must say now that I'm looking at, everything that I described in the introduction, I think that the clients and corporations are more and more receptive to those discussions. So I'm quite happy and enthusiastic about, our ability now to help all these clients to transform. So that's a bit the story.
Thank you. I can take this to the audience now. We've had only one question in the session, and that is, what key arguments are you using to convince your board and shareholders to adhere to your sustainability strategy? It's a question that actually covers some of the upcoming topics that we're going to discuss as well. But I think perhaps it would be interesting to hear from your personal experience what persuasion skills you have maybe applied in the past to get a few more stakeholders on board. Who wants to answer that question? Okay, Magali.
Yeah, so in my case, they had health and safety and sustainability committee at board level. So I have a committee there. And like I said, I was really pushing everybody out of the comfort zone. So I'm where my operational background was extremely helpful is understanding the business dilemma and, you know, all the questions we saw, all the challenges we saw in the survey earlier. So I really showed all the positive, all the win-win, all the opportunities, how if the legislation changes, how is a green product, we will be able to sell them for more money, so it was worth it, et cetera, et cetera. So I think in all decarbonization journey, at least in the industry, there's always a business upside. And if you look at it, instead of looking at it with an expert eye, you look at it as a business person, how do I make it something positive for the company? Then you talk the board language. Of course, I could tell you the board is all motivated to save the planet, but I think you would doubt that I'm not maybe saying the truth. So when you explain to them that they not only will do something good, but something that will be good for the bottom line, then you get everyone aligned.
Okay. There's a second question. What is the most effective way to increase employees' sensitivity? I mean, I think this is already partly covered, but then this is also a question, I think, very much about education of people. Is there someone here who wants to answer that?
My observation very rapidly is you need to convince the board. You probably need to convince the executive committee. The people in the companies, they're going to push you to do stuff. I think it's the other way around, is how do you free up the energy and the willingness to act of all the good intentions and the good skills that you have in the company to make them contribute to the overall agenda. I think it goes the other way around.
Josh?
Yeah, no, I totally go in the same direction as Michelle and Magali were saying. You know, I think in a sense, you know, if you look at AXA, it probably was easier than for you, Magali, because, you know, we observe the issue of climate change, right? I mean, we see it in our natural catastrophe losses. We see it in the in which are basically hurricanes and so on, which are all, a lot of it is, and floods, which is all coming from global farming. We work with farmers in a lot of places. So in a sense, this business criticality and how much we play, I think, is pretty central. But what is pretty clear is that that's what people want, our colleagues want to really work on. It's linked to this notion of purpose. Our purpose is, we want to act to protect what matters. And so what people, that's very personal, and they say, look, okay, if what we do will reduce the paper that we use, if what we do will reduce our own warming footprint, they're all for it. Actually, there's a lot of groundswell that happens. So I think it's much more shared than people might believe. It's much more about, I think the question is more around mobilizing the company around things you can scale. And because there's all the energy and enthusiasm, and the question is, where can you make a real difference?
Excellent, thank you so much. We can now move on to the second question for the panel. Describe the industry you're working in and your company's role within it. Who are the stakeholders to consider from a sustainability perspective? Tim, can I hand the question to you first, and then followed by Georges, Michelle, and Magali? Again, I want to remind the audience, sorry, I also want to remind the audience that you can ask questions through the Q&A box. Thanks.
Right, sure. Just a bit about my industry that we're in. We're in the insect industry, which is a really new industry, right? This industry is a few years old. There are a few big European players, but globally we are a challenger. In Asia, though, we're kind of at the forefront of this. Talking about kind of within the industry, even just looking at sustainability, we believe we are still very sustainable. But if you kind of look at our stakeholders, it's very different. We get our waste, so we need to give our insects something, right? Whereas a lot of the players in Europe feed them with animal feed products that they buy on the market. What we have chosen to do is to work with waste from palm oil production. So, and you're probably thinking palm oil production, and this is a horrible industry. And no, you're probably right. It is a pretty bad industry. But we also believe that we can make the change where the problems lie, right? So what we are doing is that we take the waste from palm oil production, and our insects eat it. But in order to do so, we need to have some sort of cooperation with those palm oil companies. So this is an important stakeholder for us that is very challenging, because we have been in rooms with kind of the CSOs, the chief sustainability officers, and in reality, they almost told me to my face that they don't really care about sustainability. So the push comes from maybe some of the Western buyers from them, but in reality, they don't really care. And I think in Asia, this sentiment is also, the sentiment of sustainability is very different what it is in Europe. So for us to make it work, we need to offer them something that goes beyond sustainability. We need to offer them an opportunity to take their waste. We need to offer them opportunity to kind of cut some costs, or have an opportunity to kind of be more into that sustainability picture with their buyers in Europe or the US. So I think that is really a challenge for us. Also, kind of on the investor side, we are a small, an early stage startup. We need investments, of course. I think many of my classmates or at INSEAD, we were talking, there's a lot of dry powder in impact investing, and that is true. But as an early stage startup, especially in the food industry and being kind of in this insect space, which is kind of odd, right? It's not a real tech business. We've seen that a lot of the investors that are there are at a later stage, or they invest in mature businesses, and they don't really put in money at an early stage. This is definitely growing, and so there is a huge growth in this in terms of early stage VCs that want to put money into our kind of businesses. So it's getting better, and things are getting better in the future anyway, we think. Also, if you look at the regulations, I think this is very interesting. Opportunities are opening up that we never knew about. For example, a couple of weeks ago, the European Union, at least in some countries, said that cattle feed contains way too much nitrogen, and the footprint has to come down. So cattle farmers, they had to remove soy meal protein from the diet. And suddenly they were looking for other sources that are sustainable. And suddenly the market got flooded with requests for insect protein, because it's super sustainable. So these kind of things that make us very optimistic, working with different stakeholders, that as sustainability awareness grows, regulations, for example, change, and these will change in our favor. So we think that this is it's good to be in sustainability, not just from an ethical perspective, but definitely also from a business perspective, because things are changing, and you just have to be sustainable to go along with it.
Thank you, Georges.
So we're basically engaging, or actually more than engaging, we're trying to act with many of the stakeholders. All the stakeholders we talk regularly about: investors, governments, our clients, our people. What's pretty unique, I think, in insurance is that because we have so much, we collect a lot of money from our clients, and we actually invest them. So we have an ability to actually influence a lot more of the corporation. So on the climate side, we've made some very significant commitments. So, for example, we are committed that we will limit the warming potential of our investments to below the 1.5 degree level by 2050, which is a real challenge. We've also joined the Zero Net Asset Owner Alliance that Michelle spoke about. We've moved into building, we've already issued 12 billion euros of green bonds. We've pledged to double that to 24 billion. But I think the more importantly is, and we've exited from coal, of course, but what we really are thinking now is what we need to do is we need in that space to continue to really help the transition. And so by working both on the how do you measure, because it's actually quite the taxonomy and how you can make the taxonomy practical, but also on how do you create transition economics. So we've launched a transition bond asset class with a pilot phase of 100 million going there. So that's on the, I would say, climate with our investments. Then the other thing we're trying to do is make sure we work in coalitions. So for example, Thomas Buberl, our CEO, leads the WEF group on the Green Pact. We are trying to make sure that, like Zero Net Alliances, to make sure that we are just not the other one that work on this. And then and we, on the sustainability front, we work with government, for example, on how to address systemic risks. You know, we had that for natural catastrophes in France. We're now working on it, of course, with pandemic, as is being very public, but we're also thinking about this in other parts of the industry, saying, okay, we can't just being caught by the same issue as pandemic in other parts. We can identify where we need systemic risk coverage that is common, and then we will do that with governments, for example, including agriculture. And then we work with our clients trying to offer new products and new services. So for example, in services, for example, in one of the things that's going to be very critical for everybody's resilience is, for example, health. So we're trying to move from pure risk mitigation of insurance to providing prevention and protection services, including in health, trying to move to being an orchestrator of the health services to make sure to help patients get the best care, which would lead to the lowest cost for the systems, and also in retrospect for us as well. So I think it's a win-win, better outcomes of health and better systems cost. And then finally, we sort of trying to innovate with new things. So we have a unit called AXA Climate, which basically provides support for farmers in developing country. 55 million farmers in India have some coverage, which we do with the governments, so that if their crop goes bad for climate reason, and we look at this with satellite data, then they get enough money to start the next crop season because they can get enough cash to buy their feed. So very much, very central to what we do in AXA. And then on the people side, I spoke earlier about it, and I think there is a huge amount of groundswell from our people to contribute and to mobilize. And so for us, it's really, you know, in our next strategic plan, it's going to be one of our top 3 priorities to actually act as a catalyst, because we have the influence power, and therefore that's where we should move forward on this. And I hope the whole industry is going to follow in that direction.
Thank you very much, Michel.
So there's, for me, 2 kind of answers to your question. Is, as a consultant, how do we help companies to include the stakeholders and help them to define what is their ESG roadmap and priorities? So that's one, but that's not the one I'm going to treat now, because I suppose that your question is me as BCG. So, you know, in terms of the stakeholders, we don't have investors, we've got clients, and we've got the internal barriers that I think are the most important, which could be of interest also for other companies and other sectors. In fact, the issue was to push the topic, was to build the self-confidence. BCG is a partnership. So we've got our leaders are all also stockholders, and therefore you can't impose anything. So they need, you need to convince, and to convince our partners, you need to convince it's good for their clients, and that we have a good brand and a good expertise, so that they're confident that they can make a difference in a credible way by really helping out their clients. So one of the actions we did was to install the brand of BCG in climate, which we were not. And therefore, proposing our services to international organizations and NGOs that we believe are core to changing and accelerating the climate agenda. So this is where we offered our services for the COP, to organize the COP26 in Glasgow. This is where we intervene at the WEF on all the climate issues, including organizing the Mission Possible initiative that includes all the high emitting sectors to define their climate roadmap. and that we're currently working for SBTI to develop their next stage strategy to make sure that they deploy and they become the standard. Because if we want climate to move and accelerate, there should not be any ambiguity on what standards you use and what is the right, because otherwise you got proliferating type of approaches, and that is confusing. So that's the way we did it.
Thank you. And Magali?
Yeah, thank you. So let me give you a bit more about the industry, and maybe I will share with you one mega trend. About 2 billion people are going to move to urban area in the next 30 years. 60% of that infrastructure does not exist, which is the equivalent of building Paris every week. Of course, not Paris, nothing replaces Paris, obviously. And so we have no choice as an industry. The amount of concrete is there to stay, and it has to be decarbonized because there's no other choice. So in one hand, yes, we want to be the leader, but in another hand, we are not competing. The entire industry has to move with us. Everybody has to go the same direction. That's why, by the way, we work with a lot with our industry association. But also you have to look at the full value chain, and you have to look from cradle to cradle. And I mean cradle to cradle, not cradle to grave. But what I mean by that is you need to work with the designer on how you design a building, because actually designing a building by putting the right concrete at the right place with the right strength and less concrete is also, moving from volume to performance is absolutely key, all the way to refurbishing the building, which you have seen the EU Green Deal is talking a lot about renovation, and we're completely supporting that. But when the building is beyond refurbishment and is demolished, then it becomes what we call in our jargon CDW, construction demolition waste, which is something we put straight back in our cement. So it's a complete loop. And I think it's very important because we all need to work together. Another important stakeholder is clearly the legislator. We need the laws and the standards to help decarbonize and not the contrary. And I will just give you an example. Here in Switzerland, we have a cement called Susteno, which has 20% of that famous CDW, construction demolition waste. Why 20%? Not because of science, not just because the current Swiss standard is at 20%. And not saying anything against the Swiss, by the way, the standards are usually higher than most countries, but it's just that we need to work, science needs to work with the legislator to move that in the right direction. And I could give you hundreds of examples. That's why, by the way, public affairs reports to me, because it's a very big part of the sustainability agenda to move in the right direction. Investors, obviously, investors are clearly pushing us. There is no question. Would my boss have created the CSO position at EXO level without investors is debatable, but clearly they play an absolutely key role. And of course, the clients, you were talking earlier about scope 3. My scope 3 is quite little, but I am someone else's scope 3. So when Bouygues says they want to reduce their carbon emission, they talk about their scope 3. So they need me to remove my scope 1 so that can influence their scope 3. So this is all very important. Maybe a quick word about other regions, as Tim mentioned earlier. Of course, we don't see the same enthusiasm than in Europe, but there are other things we do on the sustainability front, and I will just mention a couple. About waste, we recycle 48 million tons of waste. To put things in perspective, Valeo recycled 49. So we are as big as Valeo. Some people like to say we are a waste treatment company that is doing cement as a byproduct. So this is, well, actually, there's a lot of debate on the wording if we recycle or upcycle, but we put it straight back in our cement and it becomes a construction material from being a waste instead of going to landfilling. We have a lot of action on water and biodiversity, which I'm coming up with the rest of my strategy. We moved it compared to the pledge because we thought the pledge would overshadow too much the others. That's why we don't make it. But the last one I would like to talk about is people. We have cement plants everywhere. So if tomorrow you wanted, and I would be happy to invite you to do that after the COVID, to visit one of my cement plants in India, you would have to take a plane to Mumbai, then another 5 hours internal planes, and drive for 5-6 hours. So needless to say, by the time you arrive, you're at the middle of nowhere. And I mean nowhere. And what it means is that we employed between 1,000 and 2,000 people in a cement plant, which is basically make us the sole employer of the entire region. And that gives us societal responsibilities that are not just, if we fire someone, he's not going to find another job, he will have to move. We provide schooling. Last year, we gave healthcare to 250,000 people who were not our employees, because we have hospital, and in that region, quite often we are the best, the clinic of the plant is the best hospital of the entire area. So for us, sustainability, of course, the pledge is what we came out and what we're super proud of, but I think the entire journey has to go together, and our stakeholder also look at the rest and don't only look at the CO2. Thank you.
Thank you. Also, that was also phenomenal. Thank you so much. I've received a question now. Thibaut and Michael have asked which independent and audited certification framework you are using for carbon calculation. Is there anyone who wants to take that question?
I will just, sorry, can I?
Yes.
So in our case, because carbon calculation is very technical, some of the things are quite standard like travel, etc. But in our case, because it's very technical, it's actually driven by our association, Global Concrete and Cement Association, to ensure that all the cement makers in the world use the same carbon methodology. And this is validated by, at the moment it's EY, depending on the year, it can be someone else, but our methodology and yearly calculation is audited by auditors who actually visit our plants to make sure that what we do is what we say. So extremely regulated. We have an integrated report, which means that we publish our sustainability numbers together with our finance numbers, and we are regulated, we are on the stock market. So we have to apply the exact same rule for our sustainability data as we do for our financial data. So we cannot take any risk. So yeah, in our case, it's association driven.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Also a really good answer. We'll move on to the third question now, which is, here I really wanted to hear what you consider the most pressing challenges for your business and how those challenges can be actually turned into opportunities. Josh, do you want to start with this and then be followed by Magali, Michelle, and Tim?
Yes, that's. I think there are certain areas where there's a challenge, but you can act on it. So for us, where there are others where it's really complex because it affects many aspects of your business. So if you think about it in investments, you can, it's much more central. You have much more of the activity to act. I think the real challenge this is going to be on things like, for example, ESG or how do you rate sustainability? How do we get to the right collectively to the right measurement that everybody agrees on, and which will not. It's very easy to say green good, not great bad. But it's not helping because we want to have everybody move towards transition. And so I think the challenge will be quite a lot around making sure that collectively we have a common understanding. I think the taxonomy that has been put together by on the European level, I think is a great step forward, but that's probably one of the challenges on that one. The second one is, I think, around how do we move from pure protection to adding all the services. And again, when you add services like in health, you need to connect. This is not something that one player can do alone. So I think there's, again, this notion of coalition, of getting the different players to work together so that you maximize the quality of the system. So we're trying to do in multiple countries. In Germany, we have this platform with multiple other insurers and players that get there so that you actually create an impact on the system. And then the third one, and it's probably the biggest challenge at this stage for us, is how do you embed in everything you do, in every product, this notion of sustainability? How do you create an insurance product or an insurance claims, something that is actually go into the right direction. So for example, one of the things we are working on is this notion of build back better. So if you are insuring at home and something happens, well, what we're trying to do is create the conditions so that if the home is badly insulated, it will be rebuild better with a better insulation. Or in cars, if you are, how do you create the incentives and the capability and the quality to make sure that, for example, you can use recycled parts when necessary to create a view on circular economy. And that's probably where, and we are at this stage, probably the most challenging, because it's a lot of small things. It would be very easy to say we have a green product, but what does it mean? It will be a very small part of what we do. We need to embed it in everything we do.
Thank you.
Can I go?
Yep. Go ahead.
So in terms of challenges in the business, I mean, I think they are very clear today. We can't say the cement and concrete has got such a fantastic image because, of all the CO2 emission. So we need to move from that image to the image of we are part of the solution. And that's really what we are working on now. And that's what my team is working on, and with me, obviously. And when I say we are part of the solution, what we mean by that is, for example, all the infrastructure you need to build for renewable power. If you need to make, we did recently 3D printing for windmills. You need the concrete. So this 3D printing allows the windmills to do 25% more output than the normal. We protect the shores. We have concrete that not only protects the shores, but is made with such a surface that actually we work with marine scientists, and you have the reefs growing on it. So we can rebuild between brackets. So shifting the paradigm from we are bad, and as I explained before, there's a lot of infrastructure needed. So concrete is not going to disappear. So we need to really completely change the image. We are working on it with the association. It's very important. We have just issued some brands of concrete that is low carbon. You can only call it that way or use our label. We also have now a standardized label. We only issued it last week, so it's all very recent. But you can only use it if you are 30% lower than the carbon of a concrete of that country, et cetera, et cetera. And that shift, I think, will happen because there's a lot of pragmatic people out there, even though there's a lot of people who are not so pragmatic, who understand that if you need concrete, you better support companies that are really fighting to make concrete green. And it will take some years because it's extremely complicated, but it will. And what is interesting is we start seeing a market for our green product. So we start seeing price premium in some of we saw it in Germany, we saw it in Switzerland. It's not yet all over, but it's happening. With the EU Green Deal, we really hope that it's going to accelerate because a lot of our concrete goes to infrastructure, which is public money. So we hope that they will be requiring low carbon products to go in those infrastructure. And finally, as mentioned, green finance, obviously having green bonds linked to our sustainability performance is something that we absolutely want to do, because contrary to what Tim said earlier, in my case, the CFO is fully supporting me. So I'm quite lucky for that. It's not just luck, she's getting the investors' pressure. So she fully understands. So we are best friends, we completely work together, and we are working on ESG bond type of things. So I think altogether, myself, every time I talk about sustainability and particularly climate in our industry, I only see a world of opportunities.
Fantastic, thank you. Yeah, Tim, sorry, Michelle. He wants the next one.
So, as I said, I mean, the sustainability is both a challenge and an opportunity. It starts with the opportunity because, in fact, as I said, the way we've got impact is helping our current clients in the journey of sustainability. So for us, it's a business. It has to be, it has to be. We need to, of course, we're going to invest and to push it, but it's only if it is a business that we will have impact at scale. And therefore, that's for me in the opportunity side. On the challenge side, I would say a bit what was said earlier by my colleagues, by George and Magali, by the way, is you need to have sustainability inside. So it's not just reacting to clients asking us for a sustainability strategy or including better sustainability dimension in what they do. I think that when you look at the whole portfolio of activities we do, whether we're being asked or not, it should become our common practice that when we do an operations work, we just not limit ourselves to improving efficiency, but also CO2 and environment footprint. When we do an acquisition, we look at the ESG footprint of the acquisition that is being done. When we do a restructuring, we look out for the social implication and have a much more developed approach on what do we do with the people that we need on the side of the street. So you can see that in everything we touch, which is the transformation of companies, there's always a dimension which is environmental, it could be carbon, or it could be social, or it could be other things that we need to include in the offer, and that we should be systematic the offer of BCG. And this takes time, and I think that we're on the journey, and I think we could discussion with our operations practice on climate and environment, but it goes beyond that. So that's
Michelle, just a second. I think there's a piece of paper maybe covering your microphone because we can't hear you as well.
What I was saying is that our challenge is to make sure that sustainability inside is well included in all the products and all the projects we do with clients, independent of sustainability strategies.
Okay, thank you. And then Tim.
Yeah, thanks. So some of the challenges that we have and some of the opportunities that we see, I think first of all, I just mentioned this financing early stage impact companies, and especially in the food tech sector. I know that across the industry, others are seeing the same, so that it's quite hard to attract funds at early stage. But we also see that a lot of money is going in, as I also mentioned, into later stage. So once you get there, you can grow quickly in terms of funds. Another issue that we have been seeing is talking to impact funds is kind of some are more green than others. Most would put it in their mandate, but you know, so, let's say some are a bit more serious about it than others. And kind of us being in Asia, I think it's a very interesting element full of opportunities, but also challenges. I think the opportunity is that, you know, it's easier to make a difference in terms of sustainability because, you know, there are less regulations in many of the countries. So us making a change there, it's easier and the impact is bigger. But at the same time, you know, there are different challenges that we have that we need to tackle, which are kind of like, which I think are maybe not very relevant in Europe. But for example, our clients, we know that our European fish farms or aquaculture feed mills, they care about how much fish they use in their feed. Unfortunately, the clients that we have don't really. So we really need to be different there. We need to make our difference in terms of performance and even price. And then if you look at like an HR perspective, what we're seeing is that it's harder to recruit people who have kind of this drive for sustainability, which I think is absolutely critical for a business like a startup like us with probably lower salaries than your average job. So you need to have this personal drive there. And I think we're getting there, but still in Asia, this is a bit of a challenge, but also this is growing. I think we're seeing something similar along the same lines in governments, whereas in Europe, I think as a younger company, there are a lot of subsidies available, also a bit depending on the country, but it's relatively easy to find financial support there. And I think not just financial support, but also like land and just being able to go quickly. I think in Southeast Asia, there are specific challenges there. I mean, the sustainability again and the government level is not very high on the agenda. I'm saying all this, it sounds like I'm a bit complaining about where I am in Asia, but it's really not, because it's a place full of, as I said, full of opportunities, and the growth and awareness in sustainability is really growing. So it's exciting to be part of this. But at the same time, I'm quite envious to see European companies that are very passionate about this and really, you know, are real about kind of driving this change.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. We got 2 questions from the audience here. Stefan and Claude have asked the interesting question on Danone, saying Danone is publishing decarbonized EPS. How broad and fast are you planning to move to impact-weighted accounts? Who wants to take that question?
I can maybe talk about, we do IPNL today. So we've been publishing our IPNL, integrated profit and loss, for I think 10 years, at least a long time. Mm-hmm. We are part of VBA, Value Balance Balancing Association, we are part of the steering committee, which is also working with the big four, as we call them, to put together how the IPNL should be made. And it's quite interesting on how to calculate. At that point, we have not looked at making it at EPS level.
Yeah.
It's a start.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, so we also have integrated reporting, which I think is a very powerful way of showing the full breadth of what you do. It's something that's, as Magali said, it does require a level of quality, which I think is great because it actually motivates. I don't think we would be moving yet to the same reporting, but what we want to do is we want to make sure, and that's why we, for example, follow and publish where we are versus DJSI index or something. We want to make sure that we can report on how well we are doing, but with, I would say, exactly like Magali was saying, it has to be something that people can audit on and know that this is actually a very robust way of showing, and that's just not an internal marketing gimmick. It has to be something we can be held accountable. So that's clearly something that we are. And to coming back to the point, it's both an internal need, because that's what every one of us wants, and we want to be able to measure ourselves. And it's also something that I think our board and our stakeholders also want more and more, and they want that part of sustainability to be a higher part of what our overall objectives are.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. I think I want to close here to give us enough time to round off. But I think everyone will agree that you've just given us an incredible insight into your practice. I was very grateful to hear your personal story as well, and was very excited to hear how you're taking your businesses forward, which I'm sure is going to be very inspiring to many of the listeners today. So thank you very much for this. I want to all invite you to come and join this journey, you the listeners here. And I will hand over to Chloe, who is one of the co-founders of the Community Impact Challenge. She is going to tell us more about this incredible organization that a group of over 300 INSEAD alumni volunteers have created.
Thanks for the introduction, Bianca, and thanks to the French Association for partnering with what we call the CAC. So for those who didn't hear the intro by Thomas and don't know what it is yet, it's not a French bank. It's an initiative which was launched to make a positive impact thanks to sustainable actions and to get the best ripple effect ever, like the powerful waves that are on your screen right now. I'm very proud to be here as an INSEAD alumni to explain how we are harnessing the collective power of our 60,000 alumni community to build a better world. The aim of the CAC is the next slide, please. The aim of the CAC is to mobilize powerful networks of individuals to take action now towards sustainable development goals. And we strongly believe that it will revitalize the future of our planet, and that the collective power we are talking about is coming from individual action. And actually, we went from a discussion between two incredible individuals to a group of more than 300 passionate volunteers who are contributing actively to the success of this project. We are now an international organization co-founded by several alumni, with a core team using the agile approach like self-organized work streams, to really focus on actions and solutions and to use business as a force for good. In addition to the alumni, we're really lucky to have strong support from the INSEAD ecosystem, whether it's the school or the Hoffman Global Institute for Business and Society, or Endeavor, which is our social impact club. Today is about leadership for sustainability, and I think that our team will agree that we can relate to what was said earlier and to the poll results, because even if our organization was founded by people who are into sustainability, we also have our challenges, like upskilling the team on the topic of sustainability or digital, for example, but also on managing the short-term versus long-term objectives. However, with the tremendous motivation of the team, this is what we did this year, and our long-term plan to support our ambition to be carbon net zero by 2030. And to be honest, we were even surprised that we managed to do all of this during the COVID crisis. But it really means that tackling those sustainability issues was the need of the hour. So to achieve this carbon net zero goal, we provide practical tools that empower individuals to reduce and offset their environmental footprint from a personal and professional standpoint. And we will also partner with business schools, institutions, municipalities to expand the reach and to get a great ripple effect. So basically, we started in January with a pilot project to reduce single-use plastics. And then we really wanted to involve the community in the innovation process by co-creating the next challenge with more than 300 participants. And then we thought that creating challenges were not enough, that we needed to engage and inform the community about sustainability to get them on board. So that's why we created what we call the CAC Academy, which creates and curates content to foster lifelong learning, but also to inspire the community. We've just launched a new challenge focusing on sustainable food habits with the view to reduce the carbon footprint of food production, transport, and consumption. And every year, we launch challenges to finally reach our carbon net zero goal. So let me tell you a bit more about our pilot project. So this challenge on single-use plastics was quite a success with a lot of enthusiasm and engagement from the 2,300 members of the INSEAD community who really tried to change their behaviors and habits. And we were extremely happy that this ripple effect reached far beyond the community. And BCG kindly reported that we influenced 180,000 people and that 250 companies were involved around the globe. So the participation to this challenge also created a noticeable shift in mindset and behaviors, with 73% of people becoming more aware of ecological issues and 98% making lasting changes to their habits. It's not written here, but 93% of the participants have indicated interest in joining the next challenge. And actually, we have now evidence that that engagement, because we've passed the 4,500 participant mark for our new challenge. So what's interesting is that working on food habits is really ambitious because it can be linked to culture or religion, for example, but it was a topic voted during the co-creation by a multicultural group. So it showed that despite the personal beliefs, people are ready to find out more and to go to the next level. So not sure if you know, but 25% of greenhouse gases emissions comes from the global food supply chain, meaning that the basic need of eating plays an important role in climate change. So this challenge focuses on 3 pillars. The first 2 pillars are activity-based, and the third one is about knowledge. So the first one is about making more sustainable food choice, like eat less meat or dairy, for example. The second one is about reducing food waste, or let's say how to optimize what we consume and buy. The last one is to focus on the source of what we eat. Like, where did it come from? What was the transportation route? By air, by boat, that kind of information. And what we want to show with this challenge is that it's helping you to do something good for your health, for your wallet, but also for the planet. So I strongly encourage you to visit our website and to join the current challenge, as we can all make positive impact, one small step at a time. And I hand over now to Thomas, who will share the takeaways of this event.
Microphone. Is that okay now? So you know, it started. I'm talking about the takeaways, and I said it started badly because we need Michel told us we needed a COVID a year, and I didn't start my video. So but then he talked about the momentum, and he said that the momentum was really going on and starting, and it had to start from the board to the exco to the middle management, but the pressure was always strong on the way back from the management to the top. On the first question, which was our journey to sustainability, I think Magali said something which was essential during all of this session. Let's start immediately. You know, we have a long-term objective, but let's start immediately. George talked about how he learned that resilience was so important. And Michel talked about the transverse practice of sustainability in the other function of the companies. In our second question, convincing stakeholders, Tim said something which I think maybe is at some stage disappointing, but so efficient. He says, you have to offer something else than sustainability to the fisherman on Samoa. You have to sell him business perspective. And that's how he's building his business, which is a sustainable business, a business which is gonna push sustainability. George talked about act as a catalyst. And Magali said another fearful thing, which said 2 billion people, I don't know, I don't remember in how many years, will move to towns. So she was very happy for the business, but she said, we have to build a Paris every week. And then she talked about don't always recycle, do upcycling. Last, on the third question, on the pressing challenges and opportunities we have, we really thought about, and George was talking about that, it has to be embedded in all product services. And he gave this example, which unhappily has been very important lately for the disasters in the Alps, in the Southern Alps above Nice. We have to build back better. And I think the idea of build back better is good for everything we do, not just in the building industry. And in fact, Magali said we have to show that we're not part of the problem only or anymore, that we are part of the solution. And finally, Chloe said, you know, collective power versus individual actions, and showed that if we do a lot of individual actions, we can be part of the collective power. So what I would propose you to do is really you, all the participants on your WOVA application, is also to give to give us and to exchange on the 3 takeaways you had for this day. So please, for this evening, please share your 3 takeaways on WOVA on premium events. I think I wanted to thank you. This was a very interesting session, and it will be followed by 2 sessions, one on December 8th on inclusive leadership, and it's called All Inclusivities, if I can say so. Obviously gender, but it's gender, it's education, it's religion, it's culture, it is all of that. And then another one, which I think is of interest for us at the moment, future of work. So thank you all, and see you on December 8th.